would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. I hope you all had a fantastic week. We're going to wrap it up with some interesting news. We'll get to that in a second. For those of you who'd like to get in contact with me, the best way to do that is to head on over to the website at therebelbroker.com. From there, you can click on Contact and send me a message. If you would like to support the show and potentially win a $50 Amazon gift card, while you're there, click the red button at the top of the page. When you're asked for your email address, use the same one both times, answer a handful of questions, and you're done. You've helped the show grow, and you've put yourself in the running for a $50 Amazon gift card. We've already given it away 5 times. $250 worth of money for Amazon has already been handed out. We tend to do it at the beginning of each month, so we will revisit this at the beginning of March. If you'd like to be in the drawing for the next $50 giveaway, just head over to rebelbroker.com. Click on the big red button at the top of the page that says take the survey to support the show, and you'll be in. And good luck. And congratulations to the 5 folks who have won so far. I don't really have any other updates on the personal stuff. I've been getting some interesting mails from folks over the shows relating to acquiring a lot. And asking me why I would do it over something else. And I think just to sort of clear that one up, it's a circumstances thing, right? For me, so much of this really does come down to things you can absolutely just count on. And that's numbers. I mean, numbers don't tend to lie. So as long as you're doing your research and you're putting things together correctly and you're getting reasonable estimates and you're also building in a fudge factor, then it gives you all that you're going to need to make a good decision on what the best way is. We've talked about strategies for not being in the race with every other rat who's after what you're after. And the assumption is you're either after that investment property or you're after that first home or you're after a home in general. And when you're in a market that's super competitive, you have to figure out strategies. So I thought for today's show, we'd start off with because we've got a doozy of a topic for the rest of the show. For those of you who are landlords in San Francisco, boy, are you about to get pissed off. Particularly, and this is just nuts. But anyway, yeah, it's just going to get really bad. For all of you who have already been depressed by the low return on investment or the negative return on your investment in hopes that the market will catch up with you so that you can start being positive cash flow on your San Francisco property, boy, do you not want to miss the later part of this show. Or if you've ever thought how bummed you are that you missed out on buying property in San Francisco, we'll be talking about that in a second, and you may or may not regret it. It's all about the strategies, right? Trying to find the path that not all the other rats are taking that all end up in the same place, right? And this is a story I've told before. So many folks just go where the person in front of them is going, right? I used the last time I think I talked about this, which was a long time ago, was Disneyland. Now, I am a big fan of Disneyland. I love going to Disneyland. I love taking my boys there. I consider myself blessed that my sons, despite their age, one is about to go to college and the other 2 will be going to college next year. When I asked them where they wanted to go this summer, Disneyland was at the top of the list. So God bless them. You got to love it. But in any event, you go to Disneyland and a huge portion of your time is spent in lines. By definition, that's you following the rat in front of you. But I always think back to an example of getting in line to go into the Haunted Mansion. And Disneyland tends to be pretty good about managing lines in terms of making sure you understand where you should and shouldn't go. And Haunted Mansion happens to be one of those rides where there's two lines that lead up to the ride. And if they only want one line, well, there's usually a chain across that. So my sons and I arrive. Everybody is getting in line on the right-hand side. Everybody, and all the people who are arriving with us assume the people in front of them know what they're doing, so they go to the right side. Okay, great. But I can see there's no chain across the left side. So I jump into the left side. And what happens? I end up going right all the way up to the very front and passing a whole bunch of people who win on the right side. Now, in a broader spectrum of things, that might make me a jerk and might have upset a few people who had gone on the right side. But the point is to be observant enough to see where everyone's going and where they're not going and where that could potentially make you money. So buying a lot and building a house on it isn't just picking a different path. I mean, it's a much more complicated path. It tends to be more involved. There's a lot more hoops to jump through. Getting the financing squared away is a big deal. And as we talked about on a show a couple of days ago, don't let anyone tell you that you cannot get financing for that. You can get end-to-end financing where you start with, I want to buy this lot, and you get one loan that takes you through that whole process. Now, can there be two loans? Sure. It's just like anything else. There are different products to fill this need. And as long as you qualify, you're going to be able to choose from probably a couple of different products. In my case, I was able to find one that would take me through the whole process. We'd lock in on an interest rate. They would acquire the lot. We'd get the home built, and then it would turn into a regular conventional loan. Is it more involved? Yes. But you know what? In my marketplace, the potential payoff is gigantic, to the tune of saving. In the example I use, where I first was putting this together on a lot that I thought sounded good, it ended up not sounding good because it was in the floodplain, or in a most extreme floodplain, which was just one step beyond where I wanted to go. The numbers spoke for themselves. I could get an idea of what the home would sell for when it was constructed, because within a couple of blocks there were other homes, and this tended to be an area where the homes are on several acres, and they tend to be what folks call gentleman estates. And the bottom line was I could make a extreme profit if I just wanted to build it and sell it. I could have made about $300,000 buying the lot, building on it, and then selling it. But that wasn't really the point. The point was to acquire it at such a point that it would be positive cash flow if I rented it. It would be a great place to live. It potentially could have 2 residences on it, because in this particular city, that's an okay thing. So I could have had an in-law quarters. There are rules relating to square footage and all these other kinds of things. But the bottom line was I could then live on the land, have enough land that I could have this other unit and rent it, and that would cover my mortgage. So those are different paths, right? Another path is to search for homes that are less searched for. Let's say you are one of the 90% of buyers out there that's looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath or better, right? Everybody's looking for that. If you're someone who's in a competitive market, one thing that has depressed you is every time you go to an open house for a home like that, there are a million other people there. Well, start going to 2-bedroom open houses. Take a look at these places. Look at the lots. Look at the arrangement of the home. Would it be easy to add a 3rd bedroom? Is that a complication? Yeah, it absolutely is. But in those circumstances, what you'll end up with is a home that's probably worth a whole lot more than you paid, including upgrading, including that remodel and adding a bedroom, than if you had bought that 3-bedroom, 2-bath and competed with everyone else. So there's ways to get these things done. It might mean tightening your belt and not being able to live with that 2-bedroom for the first year of your time in the home, but you know that you can find a strategy that gets you what you want. So that's kind of my point. That's where I want folks to find their power in a transaction by doing the slightly off-center thing. If you go down that main road of what everyone's looking for, that's where you're going to get stuck. So that was kind of where I was going with that. All right. We're going to go ahead and jump into really what I think is the big item today. And it really doesn't surprise me. We've talked about this before. San Francisco is nuts. People have asked me why I don't invest in lots of different foreign countries. Well, most of them is because if you really look into the way the laws are arranged, you can't really have any confidence in what kind of property rights you might have in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You could end up in a situation where your property gets seized. For nearly the same reason, I'm not a big fan of investing in San Francisco. The Board of Supervisors of San Francisco has proven one thing. They are willing to do just about anything. And we have a great example of that. Starting this fall, this blows me away. Tuition at San Francisco community colleges will be free. Okay, we need to define free because nothing's free, right? Because all those folks who teach at those community colleges need to get paid. The property taxes for the land that those community colleges are on needs to be paid. So how is San Francisco going to pay for it? Well, San Francisco isn't going to pay for it. Technically, San Francisco doesn't pay for anything, right? We all understand that. San Francisco takes money from people who live there, and then they use that money for other things. So they are going to create a real estate tax, specifically by raising real estate transfer tax on properties selling for more than $5 million. Warning, and this is an article that comes to us from Bigger Pockets. It's pretty good. I'll have a link to it in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself. This is clearly a political thing, and I get that, and I know some people want to stay away from that, but this is also a political thing that reaches directly into the pockets of folks who are property owners in San Francisco. Now, before you just say, oh, well, who cares? It's really only going to sting those rich folks who are, with a $5 million property. Please. Yeah. No. Here's the problem. Historically, when you look back on all taxes, whether you're talking about income taxes, whether you're talking about any tax, you pick any tax in any state or national, including the IRS being created. When the IRS was created, taxes were only supposed to be on the super rich, and it was going to be like 1%. We all know how that ended up. That's what will happen here. There's no question in my mind that while it may start this way, they will have to expand it. The article from Bigger Pockets goes on to say, this story sounds simple on the surface, a classic question of should we tax the rich more to pay for more resources for the poor? But like most stories worth telling, there's more than meets the eye. So here's how San Francisco's model is supposed to work. San Francisco voters approved a ballot measure to raise real estate transfer taxes on properties selling for over $5 million. The transfer tax rate rose from 2% to 2.25% for properties selling for $5 to $10 million. Rose from 2.5 to 2.75% for properties between 10.25 or 10 million to 25 million, and rose from 2.5% to 3% for properties over 25 million. The city expects the tax hike to rake in an extra $45 million per year. Now, that money is going to go into the city's general fund. This should be the first part of the story that scares you. Think back to Social Security. Social Security does not mean that money gets taken out of your check every month and gets put into a bank account or a lockbox. I know that was a favorite term to refer to Social Security back in the 90s during some political debate or other. But none of that money actually went into a place that was held for you. It got put into general fund, and Congress basically, if there was a lockbox, it was filled with IOUs from Congress. So your money just got taken and spent. It wasn't invested. It wasn't put somewhere to collect interest on something. It got spent. It got used to build turtle tunnels in Florida and all kinds of other wonderful stuff. So that's problem number one I have with this, because the trend, whenever you have something going into the general fund, always tends to spell disaster for what the real purpose is. However, it's supposed to be okay, so it's supposed to be, and once it's in the general fund, as I implied, it can be spent any way the city wants. But the city promises that in order to sell the tax hike to voters, that it had to be tuition free for City College of San Francisco. Of the $45 million a year they plan to collect from the tax hike, they've pledged $5.4 million a year to City College. So, despite the fact they think they're going to get $45 million, they're only going to be putting $5.5 million of this into City College, according to them. So for whatever reason, they're looking at this as an opportunity to really just increase the general fund as much as possible. Making the initiative even more progressive, the City College will actually pay lower income students to attend. They're offering $500 a year to help cover auxiliary expenses like textbooks and commutes. There is one other kicker. The only requirement to receive free tuition is having been a resident of San Francisco for at least a year. That means that even undocumented, illegal, whatever immigrants are entitled to free college tuition. So that's a side thing, but I guess interesting to note. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and I'd love to hear back from you. What do you think about this? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think this is a bad thing? I don't think it's good for real estate folks. Granted, this is supposed to only be hitting folks at the high end, but remember, we're talking about a market where the average home price is already over $1 million, closer to $1.5 million. And if you're an investor who owns apartments, you pretty quickly jump up to that $5 million mark. So we'll talk about that right after this.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. Really, the big story today is San Francisco laying out how they're going to be paying for free college tuition for residents of San Francisco. They're going to be doing this through a real estate tax. And what's concerning about this is, I think one of the big things is first the debate on whether or not college should be free. I know that when I was going to college and I was paying my own way through, there was a clear decision on what's the, do I value this? What and if there was no cost to it, and if I was getting $500 extra a month as they're talking about doing here, I'm my attitude about that would very much change. My expectations on what I'm supposed to get for free would definitely be realigned. And these are more political things, right? Not so much a real estate thing. But you can, I guess what we can do is talk about this independent of that, of whether or not you think tuition should be free. What concerns me is that the way this is being done is really the same way that taxes have always been done, and not necessarily relating specifically to real estate, but always positioned in a way that, well, don't you worry, regular folks. We're just going to go after those rich folks because for whatever reason, the folks who are rich are evil and they need to lose more of their money, or they should be taken from them. But let's think about that for a second. Now, at first you could say, well, that's never going to touch me. As a real estate investor, that $5 million threshold isn't a thing for me. Well, it could be. If you're someone who is just doing single family residentials, well, maybe. However, will bet that within 5 years, something serious will happen to this. And suddenly it won't just be 5 million. They may have the breakup now. What's the lowest end? So it's 2% goes up to 2.5% for homes between 5 and 10 million bucks. It would not surprise me one bit if they simply raise that transfer tax rate, the base transfer tax rate, to 2.25% for everyone. and then have the same increase increment for these things. That's just the way this stuff always goes. Now, it looks like they're planning to take in a whole lot more money, the vast majority, right? Of the 45 million that they're thinking they're going to take in from this. And I think we should understand that just like every other expectation on taxes, that will be wrong. It will not be $45 million a year. It will be less because the folks who own properties at that price point are going to be spending more money than it would cost them to simply go through with this tax hike and deal with it and pay it. It would be far more cost effective for them to pay a very experienced tax attorney or lawyer and come up with ways to make these transactions not have to happen as a result of a transfer tax. Something will happen. People will decide not to buy, or properties will have to dip because of this particular policy. It's the same thing that we saw in Vancouver, right? Where there was suddenly a extra tax put on foreign investors, and suddenly what we saw was a 30% drop in Vancouver. So my feeling is that this could be a very chilling element to the San Francisco real estate market. And in addition, remember, the $5 million mark is not some crazy number. That's very easily a quad, right? That's very easily a 4-unit apartment. So let's take a look at what's out there right now. Not an awful lot on the market in San Francisco as far as multi-units go, but there is one over on Filbert Street in San Francisco, right near the corner of Lombard and Van Ness, a pretty popular area right near Fort Mason. This is a 3-unit triplex. So nothing horribly special, but now if this person wants to sell it, and this unit is sitting right here, if this person wants to sell it, they're going to have to figure out who's going to pay this transfer tax. Now, I'm not sure what the custom is in San Francisco. Some places you split the transfer tax. In some places, the seller is expected to pay the transfer tax. In some places, the buyer pays the transfer tax. In my area, that's the one that tends to get split. But that's a huge chunk of change when you're talking about a $5 million property. And this property is listed at $5.9 million. So it's already been on the market for 160 days. No one has bought. Now, given this scenario, if this thing doesn't sell before this tax goes into effect, my guess is whoever's trying to sell this is going to have to eat that $900,000 and bring that down to $4.999 million. So let's think about that for a second. Let's say what I'm saying is true. What's now the net result is a property may just get sold for less. I also said it would likely have a chilling effect on prices in general. Well, those are not bad sounding things, right? So if we're trying to be balanced in this and really look at the effect, it might actually have what feels like good effects on the real estate market in San Francisco from the standpoint of being a buyer or being an investor. It might slow things down. But things were already kind of slowing down, right? The key question comes in, while this might feel good in the near term, in the long term, this is likely to cause more problems. Now, this is something that kind of rings for me because of some other things that are going on in the news. California is becoming a less desirable place to be. Whether you're a business, whether you're a real estate investor, or a developer. You talk to people who build homes for a living, big developers, and they talk about how much it costs to build homes in California. They don't want to upset politicians in California, so I don't think they say much out in the open air. But when I get a chance to talk to someone, every once in a while I'll get lucky enough to have a conversation with someone who isn't just the folks you bump into at the open house when they're showing model homes in a development. Every once in a while I'll get an opportunity to talk to someone who's more at the corporate level. And when I do, and we talk about challenges of doing business in San Francisco, they talk about how you always have to go for the higher payoff in California because it's just too damn expensive to build. It doesn't make any sense to have to jump through all the hoops because it costs them the same for the regulations and the extra fees that don't seem to have any real reason for existing other than giving the city money. We've talked about those before. And it goes, so not only do we have to transfer those over to our buyers, but then it just doesn't make financial sense for us to try to then design a home that's aimed at entry-level people, because it's the time and effort it takes to go through all of this. Once you also add in all these extra costs, it just makes more sense to go for the maximum payoff. And that was actually a conversation I had about a month ago. There's a development going on here in Morgan Hill, and I was asking, the average price of every one of your homes is over $1 million. Why? Why aren't you leveraging this into at least something more mainstream, at least something where you're coming in at the average price for the community? The average price for the community here in Morgan Hill is actually about $200,000 or $300,000 less than that. So I was just asking these questions. I said, here's why. Here's the math. We'd love to build affordable housing, but you can't do it. It's too expensive to even start digging in California. Then another article came across my desk that I thought was very interesting. And the reason why I bring it up is because one of the things we've talked about on this show is how important employment is, the jobs market, right? The only way you can be someone who's going to qualify to purchase a home, if you're going to be a buyer, you need to be employed, right? You have to have income, which means there need to be jobs. Well, the city of Glendale, California are about to lose over 1,200 jobs. And why? Because Nestle Incorporated, the candy people, the candy bar folks, are going to be moving from Glendale, California to Rosslyn, Virginia, near Washington, D.C. And they're going to take all of those jobs with them. Why? Because it's a horrible place to do business. It's a $26 billion a year food conglomerate. And of course, they don't want to ruffle any feathers. But according to this article from investors.com, Nestle and its corporate brethren in California that actually make things are overtaxed and overregulated, and elected officials treat them not as honored members of the community, but as rapacious pirates. A Glendale official, for instance, blithely insisted Nestle's departure was no big deal, but rather an opportunity. Nestle has offered jobs to their affected California employees in far-off places like Missouri, Ohio, and Virginia. The city seems to think it will be able to fill their own Nestle job void by growing the high-tech job base. Now, think about this for a second. All the different stories that you hear, if you're someone who keeps track of this kind of news, you know that this is a sort of rising undercurrent in California of companies that are looking to go somewhere else. And that's a bad thing. When something starts to turn into a trend that sucks people out of a state, or not even people, just sucks the jobs out of a state, that's not a good thing. In some other examples, so just 2 years ago, Nestle was making Hot Pockets turnovers. Everyone knows who Hot Pockets are, right? If you've got teenagers in your house, you know what Hot Pockets are. They used to make it in Chatsworth, but because of regulations, they couldn't expand. So they moved their operations to Kentucky. Nestle is only the latest in a long line of companies to leave. Toyota shifted its U.S. headquarters and thousands of jobs from Torrance, California, to Dallas, another city that we've talked about before. Let's see. Toyota, OxyPeat. These are also ones. At least 1,687 California companies pulled up stakes and moved somewhere else between 2008 and 2015. They cite rule of thumb among business site selection experts that 5 companies leave for each one that actually gets reported in the press. So it's probable that as many as 10,000 companies have left in recent years. Now, I'm in kind of a unique position. I am someone who helps people sell their home. I talk to an awful lot of folks that are moving because their company's leaving. The company is shutting their doors and going to move to another state. Let's see. 2 years ago, the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation and Thumbtack.com surveyed 12,632 small businesses to grade California for its business friendliness. They gave it an F. The American Legislative Exchange Council's Rich State, Poor State report has ranked California near the bottom in both economic freedom and competitiveness for 9 straight years. Survey after survey shows the same thing, but the state doesn't seem to care. As the jobs leave, thousands and thousands of educated, trained workers leave too. From 2004 to 2013, about 5 million Californians packed their bags, while about 3.9 million people came from other states, according to a report in the Sacramento Bee. I think we actually talked about that report when it came out. So the state lost over 1 million, mostly middle-class people, representing a net loss of about $26 billion in annual income. Now, we are having a resurgence in tech right now, mostly because tech seems to get left alone. Silicon Valley entrepreneurs give lavishly to California's politicians who tend to leave them alone. But history shows such booms are fickle and inevitably turn to bust. And that's kind of my point. Despite what's said up front, these things are all likely to change. So now we're getting it from all angles. We're getting businesses that are finding it difficult to do business here. I'll tell you, as someone who was starting a business here when I started my brokerage, absolutely unbelievable pain in the butt. And in terms of the little screw yous every year, for instance, every year they want me to submit a form that just says, has anything changed? Perfectly reasonable request. Today, it's all done online, but every time I do it, I have to send them a check for $50. Whether there's a change or not, it doesn't matter. So clearly, and there's several different things per year that they do that are just constant little dings for money. And it's nuts. And that's just one small business guy. In my experience, even dealing with the state in terms of just licensing and dealing with incorporating and all these other things, just ridiculous. And I talk to a lot of high-tech folks, and I don't think they're immune either. There are an awful lot of folks. What's particularly interesting is I think there's been a weather change in the attitude. High-tech folks used to say, you know what, I wouldn't want to leave California. I love California. You can ski, you can go to the beach, you can go to the desert, you can go to the forest. It's got all these wonderful things. And at some point, some change happened right in the early 2000s where despite the fact all that stuff was great and you would love California in spite of a lot of the politics that goes on here because of that, things have gotten bad enough where before it was just businesses that were feeling the crunch. Well, now individuals are. Here's one more step. That investor who owns that $5.1 million triplex or quad, if you own a quad, you're clearly going to be over $5 million. It suddenly is becoming less and less beneficial for you to own that property there. If I had to try to calculate the financial burden of being a property owner in San Francisco, I wouldn't even know where to begin. The rules are ridiculous in terms of dealing with tenants who are abusing your property, not paying their rent, and trying to get them out of a property once they're in it is very difficult and costly. So it becomes a scenario where, you know what? Why do that? Sell it off and take that money and invest it in some other state that's going to have a little more respect for your property rights. So I guess where I'm going with all of this is a stage has been set. And the number of players on the stage in terms of who is relatively being abused by different regulations in the state in general, the number of folks being called up on the stage is getting bigger every year. First, it was big business owners. Then it was medium-sized business owners. Then it was little business owners. Now it's anybody who happens to be unlucky enough to own a property over $5 million and that you need to do any kind of a transfer. And a transfer tax could come into play in a lot of different scenarios, not simply just a sale. So that's not a small thing. And here's the other thing. I get that this is where they're starting. Again, give it 5 years and everyone will be paying a bloated property tax because for whatever reason, the city seems to assume if you get to the point where you can own property, you can afford whatever crazy tax they want to throw on top of that. I hope this has given you something to think about. I'd love to hear back what you think. It's not. I don't really want to get into a debate on whether or not you think the state should be providing tuition-free college education to folks. And remember, it's not free. Free is the wrong word. Whether or not the state should take money from some group of folks and use that money so other folks can go to junior college for free. and I get that a lot of folks don't agree with me. I'm more of a person who believes, in life you should have your resources invested in what matters to you so that you can have an expectation. My feeling is that what'll happen with this is the quality of the education will go down and you won't get the bang for the buck just in terms of the time you invest out of the experience. That could be another conversation maybe for another time, maybe over a adult beverage somewhere. We could have that chat. But in terms of where this is being put and in terms of who's being asked to pay for it, it's absolutely going to have an effect on San Francisco real estate. And I think it's going to be a fun one to watch. So I'm ready. I'm going to go ahead and get my ringside seat all padded with some nice comfy pillows. I'm going to get a little popcorn. I'm going to get a little soda. I'm going to watch this unfold because I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch happen. Thanks again for spending your valuable time with me. I can only hope that I have given you equal or greater value in terms of stuff to think about. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all next time.